Is also sidelined through injury. We'll see none of those trio sadly next time out in Malaysia. But as the waves break on the beautiful sandy beaches of the Bass Strait, what a location, what a setting this is. Always spectacular scenery and spectacular action here at Phillip Island. And this one should deliver something truly special once again, in particular with Marco Bezzecchi looking to pull off his own Aussie miracle as he looks to become just the second rider in MotoGP history to win a Grand Prix with 2 long laps. Jack Miller, the home hero, who starts from the front row of the grid, did so at the French Grand Prix in Le Mans back in 2021. That was a flag-to-flag encounter, though. Can Bezzecchi be the first rider to come back from 2 long laps in a dry Grand Prix and take the spoils? Well, we're assuming it's going to be dry. We believe it will be, despite the fact that race day 19 here today in Australia has been dominated by very blustery and windy conditions. That's why actually we'll be lights out about an hour later than our normal schedule. The organisers just moving the entire race programme back 60 minutes just to make sure that we avoided the worst of some pretty powerful gusts this morning. We've had no dramas. We've had some entertaining battles already in Moto3 and Moto2. Up next, though, is MotoGP. Matt Burton-Lewis sort of be in the commentary box. Jack Aprilia down in pit lane. As with a very sprightly sprint, it's our sprint winner, Marco Bezzecchi, who comes to the back of the factory Aprilia garage. Never has Bez taken a double win in MotoGP. He's going to have to do it the hard way with a double long lap incoming. But you have to say, Lewis, when we spoke to a whole number of his rivals yesterday, after the early seagull drama, a whole bunch of riders picking their way through a flock of seagulls. This was about the most dramatic moment of Marco Bezzecchi's sprint. It happened before it had even started. You can see there ducking for cover behind him was Fabio Quartararo. But Bez, after the seagull drama, relatively untroubled in the sprint.
Yeah, that was the only real drama for him. You feel, though, he's going to have to make a better start than he did yesterday. Ralph Fernandez, of course, seized the early advantage in the sprint yesterday until this move where they nearly clattered into each other. Bezzecchi losing it a little on the downhill approach to turn 10 before finally chasing down Ralph Fernandez and passing him into the southern loop. He's going to have to overtake a few more riders, you fancy, today with those 2 long lap penalties, which he spent pretty much all of this morning's warm-up session practicing to try and lose as little time as possible. We really feel the double long lap penalty has added some extra spikes to this Grand Prix, because without it, Bez had the speed to win at a canter at the front of the race. He wants a challenge, he's got one.
You need a calculator to work out the amount of times Bezzecchi has been inside the long lap penalty loop this weekend. It is something that is very well rehearsed from the Italian. If practice makes perfect, well, he will still be a big figure, have a big part to play in this battle. This is the reason why he has the 2 long laps, and this, unfortunately, is an incident, a collision, which threatens Marc Marquez's participation in the remainder of a 2025 World Championship campaign, which up to this very point had been superb. Come back fully loaded, come back completed, one of the best we've ever seen in history. Just 7 days prior to that scary crash at turn 7 on lap 1 in Mandalika. Unfortunately, Marc Marquez, he knew straight away there was damage to his right shoulder, a fracture in the right shoulder blade. Marc did wait a full week to try and see if that injury and some damaged ligaments would recover naturally. Unfortunately, after that 7-day checkup with his medical team in Madrid, it was obvious that a surgical intervention was going to be required. Some specialists, some experts calculating that Marc's recovery period for the injury could be 16 weeks, 4 months, which unfortunately, of course, would rule him out of the remainder of the 2025 campaign. He has not, we have to say, ruled himself out. Ducati have not said that Marc will not be back on the GP25 at any stage this season. It looks likely Valencia will be the earliest he can return. Few people saying, well, he might just come back for the post-race test session. But of course, we send our wishes, our best wishes for speedy recoveries to Marc, to Jorge Martin, and to Maverick Vinales. Of course, let's not forget, they were our front row qualifiers, our top 3 three on the grid in our 2024 running of the Australian Grand Prix.
Which leaves only this man, Alex Rins, and Johann Zarco back in 2022 and 2023 respectively, as the only two riders on the grid this afternoon who have won the Australian Grand Prix before on a MotoGP bike. Of course, Alex Rins has won here in all three classes of racing that he's competed here in Moto3, Moto2 and MotoGP. It would be overrating it slightly to say that anybody could win this Australian Grand Prix, but surely there are at least half a dozen possible contenders to win this race, considering Bez's handicap.
Best sprint yesterday for Jack Miller since the Japanese Grand Prix in 2023. Certainly his best sprint on the Prima Pramac Yamaha. And Miller, well, he's already thrilled his home fans here this weekend. Led the way in FP1 on Friday, and then having come out of a real tricky Q1 session behind Fermin Aldeguer, Miller then grasped his opportunity for a front row start with both hands. Jack's first front row of the grid in 45 Grand Prix. Put up a real good fight for the bronze medal place yesterday, just behind Pedro Acosta. This, though, is a completely different proposition. This is a different ball game. This Phillip Island circuit, one of the most punishing on tyres, particularly the rear tyre on the entire calendar. Mixing Motorsport manager Piero Taramasso saying it's the toughest they have to contend with throughout the whole year. So you're not going to be able to go gangbusters. There's going to be no gung-ho attacks on a soft rear tyre in this 27-lap race.
How on earth must this man feel walking into a Ducati box, walking into relative darkness? It's been a dark weekend for Pecco so far. Finished second last in the sprint yesterday with only his test rider teammate Michele Pirro behind him. Grid position is not actually correct, what you can see on screen there. He qualified in 11th place. He does take a 3-place grid penalty, which drops him to 14th on the grid, as if he needed any further bad news. If you watched him in warm-up this morning, he had all manner of instability on his Ducati.
He cannot wait to see the back end of this 2025 season, can he, Pecco Bagnaia? That's the reason why they're impeding his great friend Bezzecchi at the end of that qualifying session. Busted then with a 3-place grid penalty, as if he hasn't got enough issues to deal with, the 28-year-old Italian, who, I mean, where does it, you have to pose the question, where on earth does he go from here? I mean, talk about the highs and lows of a Grand Prix motorcycle racer. At the start of our Asia Pacific swing, which feels like an awful long time ago now, doesn't it, as far as Bagnaia is concerned, he was absolutely superb over in Japan, disappeared without trace last time out in Mandalika, and he has sunk once again so far here in Phillip Island. Not too many crumbs of company we can offer him either, Lewis, at the moment. It's been an absolute shocker.
Hasn't scored a single point since, which means that Alex Marquez could crown himself World Championship runner-up today. That's the mathematics. That's what he has to do today. Not sure whether Alex Marquez is reading this for the first time the same as us, but if he outscores Pecco Bagnaia by 20 points and Marco Bezzecchi by 12, then Alex Marquez will secure second in the championship today. If he doesn't today, surely he will very shortly. 20 points gain over Bagnaia means that he needs a minimum of second place, of course.
Well, there have been so many questions circling around the paddock and circling around the whole MotoGP fan base, really, about what is going on right now with Pecco Bagnaia. Well, there's one man in the know. What on earth is going on, Jack? He's with Davide Tardozzi, the boss.
Yeah, very, very tough weekend for the factory Ducati squad. It's not often that we see both of the bikes at the bottom of a race. And warm-up this morning, it seemed to get yet worse, Davide. Have you got an explanation of what's been happening this weekend?
No, we do not have an explanation, otherwise we have found the problem and solved it. But yeah, we tried something, very, very tough this morning. That doesn't work, and now we are back in a different setup. But yeah, this morning we make some, I want to say, funny setup to try to understand. But then we are back in quite normal situation, and we'll see how it works.
I mean, how is Pecco mentally dealing with everything that's been going on of late? From the highs of Japan to being dead last time out, 30 seconds behind, 32 seconds behind yesterday for a world champion. Mentally, it must be so difficult to cope with.
Yeah, honestly, he's devastated inside, but we are trying hardly to try to understand, because as you said, Jack, coming from the winning, the domination of Japan to being the last the following week with the same bike, for us is something hard to understand, but obviously we trust Pecco, and we are trying to solve his problem. Now this shaking on the front is something that is not being understood from our engineers, and we'll see today, and then we will have another tough weekend next week, but we are hardly trying to help him.
That's the thing, with the races coming so fast every weekend, there's no break for Pecco. How critical is this situation right now?
Yeah, I think that mentally is very hard, and is a tough year, so we are trying to manage it on his side in the best way, but it's not really easy to do it. But in the end, again, we trust Pecco. He show his potential in Japan, and coming from first to last is something that never happened. And yeah, we have to find out something, but not easy.
Thanks, Davide.
Yeah, it's certainly not easy. It seems like everybody kind of a bit bemused, a bit perplexed about Pecco's current issues. I've never seen anything like it in my long Grand Prix career, where a rider goes from the top step of the podium to the back of the pack and just nowhere. I mean, it's not just that Pecco was last in Mandalika at the wrong end of the sprint yesterday. It's the massive gulf in time. He's just nowhere. I mean, just the time yesterday in the sprint, he was doing 32s when the pace was 27s, 28s. It was just abysmal.
Well, pole position in Moto2 yesterday was in the 129s, and Pecco Bagnaia's best lap of the sprint was a 29.2. So that gives you an idea of just how much he was struggling, and it was hard to watch when he came into the Ducati box yesterday, and it was hard to watch him in the warm-up this morning. Clearly, that rather extreme and sort of experimental setting, should we call it, did not work, because he looked like he was riding on gravel when he was coming out of the final corner. The Ducati shaking from side to side, and he came into the pits early in the session. Ralph Fernandez, though, well, if the sprint yesterday is any kind of form guide, is Raul in the pound seats to take advantage of Marco Bezzecchi's double long lap penalty, because the Aprilia seems to be the pick of the bunch this weekend.
Certainly does. Bezzecchi led home Ralph Fernandez in an Aprilia 1-2 on Friday. He led home an Aprilia 1-2 with Bez yesterday in the sprint. And looks like he might well have the potential for a first Sunday Grand Prix podium. This was the start yesterday, immediately around the outside of Quartararo. Alex Marquez, of course, got the whole shot on the Gresini Racing Ducati. Alex, though, was to run a little bit wide as the field attacked the southern loop, turn 2. And just watch this, seizing his opportunity there as Marquez does run offline the 73 Ducati. Yeah, no wonder he's got a big smile on his face, because that saw Ralph Fernandez sweep into a sprint lead, which he made Marco Bezzecchi work hard to take it away from him. To be fair, this was the key moment. Bezzecchi just setting that move up beautifully. Just made sure he got the corner speed and his braking marker nailed on going through the Duan corner, and on that flip-flop, the change direction into the southern loop. That was the key move as far as Bez was concerned. But that's a best ever MotoGP finish for Ralph Fernandez. Second in the sprint. Yeah, Vamos and a big fist bump. No wonder he looks pretty cool and calm, because surely he knows that this, given Aprilia's clear advantage and clear speed around some of the fast section of Phillip Island and just his potential all weekend so far, this is a great opportunity, his best opportunity, you feel, to snatch that first Sunday Grand Prix top 3.
Well, normally when we come to Phillip Island, we're looking skywards to work out what the weather's going to do. We were hoping for dry conditions and for the wind to die down a little bit before lights out. What's the current situation, Jack?
Yeah, the good news is the wind has definitely died down compared to when these bikes were last out in morning warm-up earlier this morning. It is significantly lower. There is, however, slight concern about the rain. There is a little pocket of weather just to the south of us at the moment. I just went to speak to Lucio Cecchinello, and this will be interesting for the LCR squad, because they are preparing the second bike for wet conditions just in case. So crucially, not only are they preparing for a flag-to-flag scenario, but if there are any problems on the sighting lap, on the warm-up lap, then for both Johan Zarco and Somkiat Chantra, that second bike is ready for the wet. So it's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, I'll be looking skywards as ever, and if we get any raindrops, I'll let you guys know.
Well, that would really be a turn up for the Bucks, wouldn't it, here in Australia? The last forecast that I looked at, it was suggesting rain late into the evening here on Sunday night in Australia. We just saw there Brad Binder copping a penalty, a three-place grid penalty after bulking Johann Zarco at the end of a Q1 session, which actually could have broken some home hearts because it looked like Zarco was potentially going to bump Jack Miller out of a place in that top two. Of course, flag-to-flag races in 2025 have already been very, very kind to Johann Zarco, haven't they? That unforgettable French Grand Prix at Le Mans for the 35-year-old. 2006, right here in Phillip Island, it was the first ever flag-to-flag MotoGP battle, wasn't it? And we're reminded constantly when we come to this part of the world of Marco Melandri's absolutely mind-blowing, one-handed, massive tyre slide through the final corner. So will the rain prove to be a pain here in Australia?
Well, whatever the forecasts say, you can never truly say no with confidence here in Phillip Island, can you? We came here on Saturday morning expecting fairly stable weather conditions, and then rained, and rained quite heavily for around about half an hour, around about the time Moto3 FP2 got underway. Jack Miller, surely he won't be bothered whatever the conditions, although surely has his best shot of a dry weather result today on board that Pramac Yamaha. Had he had a bit more top end to get past Pedro Acosta on the straight down to Duan Corner, he might well have been on the sprint podium yesterday. He was denied by just half a tenth of a second. So
many riders well aware as they made the long journey down from Indonesia to Australia that this weekend, minus Marc Marquez, minus Jorge Martin, minus Maverick Vinales, was going to present a great opportunity to grab some headlines, grab some glory. And Jack Miller so far has seized that opportunity with both hands, has he? No Ducati on the front row of the grid for the first time in over 5 years since the European Grand Prix at Valencia in 2020. First time, of course, we saw no Ducati on a sprint podium in 58. The last time there was no Ducati on a Grand Prix podium, that was also an awful long time ago. British Grand Prix at Silverstone in 2021. So, yeah, Ducati, Fabio Di Giannantonio will be hoping that he can keep that golden run going. Probably felt like he had podium potential yesterday, had he not started from all the way back in 10th place. Jack just informing us as the riders leave pit lane. Piero Taramasso spoke to Jack earlier on this weekend, saying that maybe this was yesterday, that 2 or 3 riders, having gained information on the soft rear in the sprint, might take a punt in this full-length 27-lap battle. But at the moment, our information from Jack is that every single rider is coming to the grid, at least, with a medium rear tyre fitted. Nobody at the moment taking the big gamble that Jorge Martin did here in 2023.
Well, pole sitter Fabio Quartararo was one of the riders who felt like the likeliest to go for the soft rear tyre. He got the front tyre choice wrong yesterday, going for the medium, which he said felt like chewing gum. He wanted the front tyre. Here is your allocation from Michelin: asymmetric front and rear to cope with the very specific demands of this Phillip Island circuit. So many long, punishing left-handed corners around this Phillip Island circuit. If you were absolutely convinced and were able to say with certainty that rain was coming midway through the Grand Prix, then that might convince you to go over to the soft rear tyre, because it wouldn't have to do the race distance. You'd be switching over to wet. But with the likeliest scenario at the moment being of a dry Grand Prix, the medium, the preferred pick.
One of only 3 tracks on the whole calendar, with Sachsenring and Valencia, where every single tyre in Michelin's allocation is asymmetric in configuration. Turn 12, the left-hander, a long sweeping left-hander onto the Gardner Straight, generates the highest temperature, rear tyre temperature in the whole season, which is something to consider when you think that we race in the tropical climates of Buriram, of Mandalika, and next weekend in Sepang. Marco Bezzecchi just about to complete his slowest lap of Phillip Island of the weekend so far, as he goes into fuel conservation mode. You do spend so much of this 4.448 kilometre Phillip Island lap pretty much at full throttle. Not the thirstiest circuit on the calendar in terms of fuel consumption, but certainly one that you have to factor in, particularly as well with all the wheel spin that's potentially generated from the tyre wear.
No one that we've seen at this stage is tempted to scrub in a set of wet tyres in anticipation of needing them in the Grand Prix. They're all going to the grid on slick tyres. Pit lane is open though for another 3 minutes if they do want to come back up pit lane one more time. Well, it's a spectacular setting. We thought we were going to be bathed in sunshine this afternoon for the Australian Grand Prix, although it is noticeably warmer than it was yesterday. Probably not as warm as most were used to in the last couple of weeks when they were staying over in Asia after the Indonesian Grand Prix, but from air temperatures highs are around about 13, 14 degrees, as once again the riders have to pick their way through a flock of seagulls. We're into the low to mid 20s this afternoon, so around about 8 or 9 degrees warmer than we had for the sprint yesterday.
Picking their way through turn 10, where Andrea Iannone, in that infamous battle of 2015 here in Phillip Island, had the scare with the seagull. As Fabio Quartararo then, for the 21st time in his MotoGP career, 24th in his Grand Prix racing career, comes to pole position. Are these hotter conditions where you think Quartararo and Alex Marquez, who we thought were going to be big podium contenders in yesterday's sprint, they kind of dropped the ball a little bit going for the medium front tyre. Quartararo said he realised immediately on the first lap that that wasn't the best pick on the front row of the grid, hoping to put some more smiles on the faces of the home crowd here. It's the Aussie Jack Miller with Jack.
Well, Jack, what a weekend it's been so far. On the front row for the Australian Grand Prix. If we know you, you're going to be absolutely all in here. Ready for it?
Yeah, we'll give it a crack. No, it feels good, honestly. Weather's looks all right. Wind's come down a little bit. We'll see what happens with this cloud cover that's all over us. But no, I'm feeling good. Had an awesome weekend so far, and you know, if we can top it off with the solid result this afternoon, that'd be fantastic. Senna, massive shout out to him. Awesome day for the Aussies already with Senna and Charles. So we'll see what we can do.
Good luck.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah, no pressure, Jack, at all after what we've seen already from the home heroes in Moto2 and in Moto3. First Australian on the front row at Phillip Island in MotoGP since Casey Stoner, of course, recently inducted into the MotoGP Hall of Fame. That was all the way back in 2012. He has been victorious here in front of his home crowd previously, Jack Miller, in the 2014 Moto3 battle. He has been on a MotoGP podium here as well 6 years ago in 2019. Rain or shine, as Jack said to Jack, he's going to be going all in, isn't he, to try and get another podium here in front of his home fans.
Starting right next to him then, the pre-race favourite, well, to many he is, Marco Bezzecchi, even though he starts with the double long lap penalty to serve. Here is the grid, as Jack informed us, everyone on the medium rear. While you look at the grid, let's head down to the grid and speak to the boss at KTM. What chance of Pedro Acosta fighting for the podium today? Aki over Jack.
Yeah, once again proved yesterday that Pedro, the toughest man to overtake on the MotoGP grid right now. Aki, the switch to the medium rear, could that help you guys today? How do you fancy your chances?
Hopefully. It has been a few times this year that we see that on Sunday with the harder rear type. Maybe we, let's say, somehow riders are a bit more comfortable. That at least it's not this, maybe those small problems what we have sometimes with the soft rear. And could be that then we are a little bit better position. But okay, now the main point is, of course, first of all, to see that if rain is coming or not. And of course, the latest discussions are just about this, if it's coming and what to do and all the possibilities. But hopefully it stays dry. And I think still the main option for everyone is hard front and minimum rear for the race.
According to your information, how likely is it that this rain arrives?
If we trust our radars, it should not come anymore. But if you look to the sky, you cannot be sure.
Good luck, Aki.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks to Aki. What's the famous saying in this part of the world? If you don't like the weather, just wait 10 minutes because it'll be completely different. 4 seasons in a day is how they describe the weather in Victoria. So we just saw Fabio Quartararo getting lined up for an attack from pole position. We just saw that grid graphic. And as you could see quite clearly, Somkhat Chantra, the only outlier in terms of the tyre choice, the Thai rider, the only rider that's gone for the medium front. Every other rider, our current information is hard front, medium rear.
As mentioned, Fabio Quartararo not exactly pleased with his medium front tyre yesterday. He said he knew immediately that he had made the wrong call. Doesn't want to, I guess, try and compound that by making another tyre choice mistake today. So he hasn't gone for the soft rear tyre. We're expecting a slower pace, of course, than we had in the sprint yesterday. But Marco Bezzecchi surely has to go on the attack early on. He has to try and secure the lead on that first lap and try and stretch clear. With those 2 long lap penalties to serve, he's surely guaranteed to emerge from those long laps in traffic. The question is, how much?
Maverick Vinales has done it. Aleix Espargaro has done it. Double winners for Aprilia in previous years. it would be some going, wouldn't it, if it's a double win from a double long lap for Bezzecchi. Fabio Quartararo, mindful of the threat still posed from Bezzecchi, one of a whole bunch of riders who were asked yesterday, well, given his brilliance in the sprint, do you still see Bezzecchi as favourite for the Grand Prix? Despite the long lap visits, Fabio Quartararo, one of several contenders who said absolutely, see nothing to suggest that Bez will not be able to recover from the long laps, which are going to cost him anything sort of around 4 to 5 seconds. So it's a handicap and a hindrance that he certainly would have wanted. I guess from our point of view, and from all of you watching at home as neutrals, it's probably the best thing that could have happened. Not for Marc Marquez, of course, as Marc recovers from a shoulder blade injury, but Marco Bezzecchi, without those 2 long laps, well, this could have been a runaway success for the Aprilia start.
Yeah, I guess in addition to the pure time loss of the long lap itself, it's whatever time he's going to lose with the traffic he then emerges into, and potentially wear to his tyres by having to push a bit harder to overtake those riders that pass him when he comes through the long lap penalty loop. A little bit of a smile and a wink there from Gigi Dall'Igna, who's expecting normally victory, but I don't think he's expecting that today. Can Fabio Quartararo end his winning drought from pole position? He's speaking now to Jack.
Fabio gone to the grid with the medium rear. How difficult a decision was that? Were you tempted at all by the soft?
No, because the consumption was way too high, so at least it was an easy choice for the tires. But yeah, let's see how it's going to work the first lap, especially with the rear medium. But I'm going to do my best and try to push from the
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks to Fabio Quartararo, winless in the last 68 Grand Prix, all the way back to the German Grand Prix at the Sachsenring in 2022. Does the absence of key figures like Marquez, Martin and Vinales open the door, push it wide ajar for Quartararo and co? Well, surely it does. The problem is, how do you stop Bezzecchi? Will the 2 long laps be the only way to stop Marco Bezzecchi in this 27-lap Grand Prix of Australia coming your way in, what, it's about 15 minutes' time? At the moment then, we're still looking at our commentary box window, and there are some rather worrying and threatening grey clouds. It is still dry. For how much longer that remains the case, well, that's anybody's guess in this part of the world.
Yeah, that is a pit lane, as you can see, with our own Jack going through the foreground, full of spare bikes ready to be set up, as Thor himself watches from the grid. Chris Hemsworth, who was here yesterday, certainly enjoyed his first MotoGP experience, met the Aussie home hero Jack Miller, who now returns to the grid, heading across to the front row.
He's not the most famous Chris on the grid, though, is he? Chris Vermeulen, former Grand Prix winner and home crowd favourite, is doing sterling work for some of our Aussie TV colleagues down on the grid. Well, yeah, fantastic to see Hollywood A-lister Chris Hemsworth enjoying all the build-up to this Australian Grand Prix. Neil will certainly be hoping as well that there's going to be some home success delivered by Jack Miller. You just saw there that beautiful Phillip Island race winning trophy. It's such an iconic prize to win at an iconic Grand Prix venue. It's one race that every rider wants on their CV. Of course, this man has got one on his CV, an Australian MotoGP win in that incredibly dramatic 2023 race. Moved to Saturday, of course, with concerns about the inclement weather on Sunday, and what a race it was, as Jorge Martin bolted, gambling on the soft rear tyre when he was fighting for the World Championship. What a punt that was. So close to success. 26 laps and 4 corners. Martin looked like a genius, looked like a hero, but quickly went to 0, and it was his then Pramac Ducati teammate Zarco who came steaming on through to an unforgettable victory. And for the first time since, what, Valencia 2016, we witnessed the Zarco backflip.
Some of the very best MotoGP races of all time have taken place here. The 2015 battle, which of course the Dusters probably never going to settle on. 2017, we also saw another epic battle at the front of the race. Will we see something similar here this afternoon? There is Chris Hemsworth with Jack Miller, 2 Aussie heroes sharing a moment together on the grid. A Hollywood superstar next to a man who will certainly earn superstar status if he can win the Australian Grand Prix.
Looks like Jack's about to go a word with Chris. Someday we'll go immediately down to Jack and Chris on the grid.
Yeah, just no camera, Chris. We're on the world feed globally with MotoGP. We've just seen you embrace Jack then. I know you're a huge fan of two-wheeled motorsport. I guess you're going to be rooting for the number 43 in this one.
Absolutely, yeah. Trying to give him some advice. My advice was don't listen to me. Have fun, go win. But it's good, mate. I grew up at Phillip Island, and it's interesting talking to a lot of the guys how they say this is their favourite track out of a lot of the places or the circuits around the world. And there's something, you know, obviously personal and nostalgic. Having spent a lot of time here myself. My dad used to race here many years ago, so it's exciting.
In these MotoGP machines in full flight, is there anything quite like it?
Oh, not at all. It was just you know, it's like you know, the Formula One has the same sort of instant visceral effect on the body, and the bikes I feel more familiar with, and I don't know, certainly gets the blood running in an intense fashion and makes you want to get out there and have a ride yourself.
Great to see you here. Enjoy the race.
Thanks for having us. Cheers.
Yeah, great get that, Jack. Well done, mate, down on the grid. Always fantastic to see a global superstar sharing their love and affection for this great sport. Of course, he's from this part of the world in Phillip Island, isn't he, Chris Hemsworth? Well, the advice was very simple, wasn't it, to Jack Miller? Don't listen to me, have fun and win the race. Brilliant stuff from Chris Hemsworth. Okay, then, Ralph Fernandez, second in the sprint yesterday. What a day it was for Aprilia and for Trackhouse. Can they take the fight for a win here in Phillip Island? Let's get the thoughts of the boss, Davide Brivio's with Jack.
Davide, second yesterday, with Marco having the long lap today, the double long lap. Does that make Raul the favourite?
No, I mean, one off, I would say. Yeah, I mean, we cannot hide ourselves. Raul here, he got the speed, he's riding well, but then of course, you know, the race is always unpredictable. Let's see how we can start, how we can manage the tire through the race, because here in Phillip Island it's always, you know, a thing. Of course, everybody's on a medium today compared to yesterday on a soft, so it's a different game, but tire management always plays an important role. So yeah, I mean, we can do a good result. But okay, that's the sport. Let's see how the sport, what the sports will give us back.
Good luck today, Davide.
Thank you.
Ralph Fernandez for Trackhouse Aprilia certainly does have the potential to deliver a great result, doesn't he? Second in the sprint, leading it for the first half of it as we get ready for the pre-race grid ceremony here. Still dry. We keep looking out of our commentary box window rather nervously, just making sure there's no spots of rain. Myself and Lewis have an absolutely brilliant perch, the best commentary box position we have of the whole season. We're just on the outside of turn 4, the Miller corner, so we can see the MotoGP bikes powering through turn 3 up towards the Siberia corner as well. We're going to take a very short pause then now, as it's always a very special moment as we get to hear Advance Australia Fair ahead of the 2025 Australian Grand Prix here at the fantastic Phillip Island.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is goodbye sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty. Page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia
Fantastic part of the world, a fantastic racetrack, and a fantastic rendition of Advance Australia Fair by Sam and Sam then, as we continue our countdown for this year's Australian Grand Prix. Johan Zarco just checking out the shaven head of Jack Miller if this is a flag-to-flag race, you know two of the bravest and boldest in rapidly changing conditions are going to be Zarco and Miller. They have both previously won flag-to-flag battles in MotoGP. Jack Miller won a flag-to-flag battle with 2 long laps himself. That's the only time it's ever happened in Grand Prix history. Perfect timing, Marco Bezzecchi. That's the moment that he's chasing down. It's never been done in a full dry Grand Prix, has it? Bezzecchi then and Raul Fernandez, first and second in the sprint yesterday after being first and second on Friday. Can they get the job done again here this afternoon? Let's get the thoughts of the boss, Massimo Riva. Who's a Jack?
Well, Massimo, everybody I speak to says that despite the double long lap penalty, Marco's still the favourite for this one. Do you agree with them?
No, I don't. I think there is Pedro, there is for sure there is Raul, and there are a few more riders that having 2 long lap penalty. I don't think it's about the 2.5 seconds roughly that you lose per lap, but per penalty. But it's more about the traffic. You jump in, doing these 2 penalties in the first 5 laps. You will be in the middle of the group. So how much time do you can recover? That is the big question. And not doing any kind of mistake is not going to be easy. I mean, Indonesia is still in our mind quite fresh, so better not to do mistakes and get some good points.
Does Marco have a direct plan on how to tackle the double long lap penalties, or does it depend on the start?
Yes, obviously the start will be a key factor for sure.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, the reason Jack asks that, I guess, if Marco Bezzecchi does take the lead at the start and is able to extend his advantage, he will surely wait as late as possible before serving those long lap penalties. Guess he might have to just take a decision if he's bottled up early in the race and just get them out of the way and then chase back from further back down the order. It is going to be fascinating to see just where Bez emerges at the end of the second of his 2 long laps. He won't be able to come through there on the very first lap. He'll get the instruction on his dashboard sometime on the first lap after he's passed turn 4, and then from that point he will have 5 laps in which to serve 2 long lap penalties. The long lap penalty zone, which I'm sure you're up to speed with now, but in case you're not, it is on the outside of turn 4, Miller corner.
It certainly does add an extra dynamic, an extra dimension, doesn't it, to this Australian Grand Prix. Bezzecchi clearly the fastest rider on circuit all weekend, having to do the 2 long laps. Will some rain throw another spanner in the works? Blimey, can you imagine if Bezzecchi has to contend with a flag-to-flag race and 2 long laps? Who knows whether the heavens will open here very, very shortly. We certainly hope they don't, as Fermin Aldeguer, well, brought crashing back down to earth with a bit of a bump, wasn't he, yesterday, after his brilliance in Mandalika a couple of weeks ago. Second youngest rider in MotoGP history to win in the top class. First rookie to do so since Hoy Martin in 2021. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the momentum gained from Aldeguer in that runaway success in Indonesia has already sort of been sucked out of his sails after a crash at Siberia and outside the point scoring places yesterday in that sprint. Jack Miller then, front row of the grid for the 30th time in his MotoGP career. He has been here before. 30 years of age now is the rider from Townsville. Can he deliver a top performance to send the Aussie fans home happy? Marco Bezzecchi. It's going to be all about his tactics and strategy, isn't it, in those first 5 laps where he has to do the 2 long laps. Raul Fernandez also a big contender, no question, maybe even for the victory, depending on what happens to Bezzecchi ahead of him on that factory Aprilia. Just some last-minute words of encouragement then for Miller.
It might be Jack Miller that Marco Bezzecchi is looking to for some inspiration. Jack Miller is the only rider ever in MotoGP who has served 2 long lap penalties and still won the race. He got those for speeding in the pit lane during that flag-to-flag race in Le Mans back in 2021. That is the only time a double long lap penalty has ever been overcome to take victory.
Pedro Acosta We know what a rocket ship off the line that KTM RC16 is. And as we saw quite brilliantly throughout the whole of the Indonesian Grand Prix on the Sunday, and then yesterday in the sprint, Pedro Acosta right now is arguably the hardest rider to overtake. He's the ultimate blocker right now. As Acosta, he says, well, I've got to just play the cards that I'm dealt with. The KTM, it has strength in certain areas, and I just have to capitalise on that. Miller then looking to be the first Australian home winner in Phillip Island MotoGP since 2012. Casey Stone and Marco Bezzecchi looking for a double win with a double long lap, but firing away from pole position. Fabio Quartararo looking for his first victory in 3.5 years. The Yamaha star leads the field away from the front of the grid.